What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Shonen Express podcast. On this podcast, I spend time talking everything Weekly Shonen Jump. So everything that comes out in the magazine, I read it and then I bring it here to be able to talk with you guys about it and interact with it. I've made videos on this channel in the past that you may have seen or maybe you haven't. Going over Weekly Shonen Jump before. I've made shorter videos as well as longer videos, and these podcasts are going to be kind of longer, and I want it to be that way because I want to be able to spend time talking about all the series that come out in Weekly Shonen Jump, mainly because I really like Weekly Shonen Jump. I like all the series that run in it, and so I want some time to be able to talk at least a little bit about all of them that come out, and so this might be a little longer, but I'm excited to be able to do this again. I love Weekly Shonen Jump, and to be honest with you, as someone who reads all of Weekly Shonen Jump, there's not a lot of us here, at least where I come from. I'm in the United States, and there's not a lot of people that read all the series, and so I love talking about Weekly Shonen Jump and the series that run in it. Weekly Shonen Jump has been hugely influential in my life. I think about the first manga I ever read, and really one of the first stories I fell in love with being Dragon Ball. And then, going on even in today. I mean, I have a large manga collection myself that I continue to grow, and most of that comes from the pages of Weekly Shonen Jump. And so this magazine means so much to me, and so I really want to be able to talk about the series that are in there. So yeah, with that said, let's get into this episode. Now, you're going to want to know there's going to be spoilers in this episode, and so that hopefully doesn't come as a surprise to you, right? We're going to be talking about the series, the newest chapters from all the series in Weekly Shonen Jump. So, just so we're all clear, before I start talking about a series, I'm going to say the name of the series, and I'm going to say spoilers for this before I jump into it, okay? Just so you know to either not listen to that part or skip through that part if you don't want spoilers from that. I'm going to be honest with you folks. To me, when I'm reading a series, so let's say you read 3 or 4 of the series in Weekly Shonen Jump, and you want to listen to this podcast because you want to engage with those, see what I have to say about those 3 or 4 series. Feel free to do that. Skip through the series that you don't know and just go to the ones that you do. And if you want to listen to the series that you don't know, go for it. I don't really think that there's going to be much of a problem in these kind of lighter spoilers that I have, but I want to give you guys the decision-making power to say whether you want to hear spoilers about a certain series or not. And if you haven't read a chapter this week, just read that chapter. I can't begin to tell you how cool it is to me that all of Weekly Shonen Jump is made available for us for free on the Viz app. If you don't know this, if you go to viz.com, all of Weekly Shonen Jump is there for free. You can read the first 3 and last 3 chapters of every series that runs in the magazine for free right now. And if you want to get the back catalog, if you want to read all the way through and catch all the way up on a series, which I highly encourage, you can do that for $2.99 a month, I think. I'm subscribed to that, and I think it's a great deal. But yeah, this is not sponsored, by the way. I just really think it's a great deal, and I really think what they're doing is awesome in giving us the ability to access these series that we wouldn't have had, that when I was a kid, I didn't have this kind of access. And so I really love that we do have that access now. So yeah, but all of that to say, if you read a series and you want to get caught up before you listen to this, I totally get it. Go read that series, then come back and listen to that part of the podcast, and I'd love to have you back in. So, how I'm going to kind of structure this podcast is every week we're going to talk about the cover, we're going to talk about the color pages, so what series got color pages, we're going to start there. Then, if something ended, then we'll talk about the series that has ended. I'll briefly mention stuff that's on hiatus or on break this week, and then we'll go into the others. I'm simply going to base my order based on what the Viz online, the Viz website shows as the order that they came out. This is not based on any kind of table of contents thing. I could look that up, I guess, if I really felt like it, and maybe I'll do that sometime in the future, but that doesn't matter to me so much at this point. as covering the cover and the color pages first. So that's what I've got to say. So without kind of putzing around too much here, let's get into it. So first of all, spoiler warning for Kagurabachi. Sorry. And I hope I'm saying that title right. Well, Kagurabachi got the cover this week, and it's its first chapter. This is the debut of this manga. I've kind of started doing this podcast in an interesting time because we're like jumping in during a time where we're in the middle of new series coming out, right? We had Mama Yuyu come out last week. We have Kagurabachi coming out this week. And then next week we have another new series, and possibly another series that ends as well. As we saw last week. What ended last week? Wow, it's not good. Tenmaku Cinema ended last week, and I really liked that. But I see why it ended. But yeah, so we'll see if we get another end. Something ends next week. I'm not sure what that would be. I'm not really sure I even have a guess on that. But anyway, we're here to talk about Kagurabachi. So Kagurabachi, it's his first chapter. We start out with kind of like a flashback scenario, and some manga do this for their first chapter. I think even One Piece, One Piece does this to a certain extent, where you see the first thing you see is a kid, a young child Luffy, but Kagurabachi seems to be doing that. We see a child version of our main character, and it's terrible that I have forgotten his name already. It's like Ichinose or something. It's Chihiro. It's Chihiro. Wow, I was way off. Yeah. So we see a child version of Chihiro training with his father, in the way of being a swordsmith, and we see him he wants to become this swordsmith. And what I really like about this is I like how weird his dad is. I think it's really cool that his dad is very serious about his work, but very strange and kind of eclectic and scatterbrained with the rest of his life. I think it's kind of funny, and I loved seeing kind of the straight man, goofy man thing with Chihiro himself and how they kind of work things out. Even with the fish, and like he's like, I'm gonna have to take care of these fish now. I have more responsibility, but I love that Chihiro recognizes his dad is a true genius when it comes to making weaponry. And that's no lie. And so we get this little this little intro thing, and that lasts most of the chapter. Most of the chapter is dedicated to when Chihiro was a kid training with his dad, and we see the very important conversation his dad has with him about being a swordsmith, and that being a swordsmith means that you have to take responsibility for the things that your swords do. If you create a strong sword and it falls into the hands of someone evil, that burden is partially on you. And so what I kind of like about this conversation is Chihiro's response is, I'm committed to taking it on. So Chihiro's dad says, can you carry that burden? And we see Chihiro think a little bit and then say, I don't know, but I'm committed to taking it on. And I really like this response. And the dad's just kind of like, okay, if that's how you feel, all that's left is for me to believe in you. And that's really cool to see. And after that scene, we see a picture of his dad's back, and then we flash forward to 38 months later. And that's 3 years, right? 3 years and some change. So 38 months later, we see these Yakuza cutting up these people that are resisting them. They've taken over a town, and they're being cruel. And we see who maybe will be the main villain, but my guess is he won't be the main villain in this sorcerer. The Yakuza are backed by this sorcerer who has these special abilities, and that's why they're so scary and so feared. And this sorcerer definitely makes his presence felt here in a creepy, kind of very scary way. I liked him a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing more from that guy or from any other sorcerers that are there. But then, of course, we jump to Chihiro, who is older now, has a scar from his battle, as they talk about this scar. Him and a character that I have to assume is going to be important going forward. What was that guy's name? Oh, Mr. Shiba. Mr. Shiba seems like kind of like the info guy, and so they have this conversation on a train about his scar and about what they're gonna do, and by the time they get there, they see the bodies of the resistors strung up, and this seems to definitely irritate Chihiro, and the two of them, Chihiro and Mr. Shiba, go in and start taking out the Yakuza, and the fight's really cool. It's very flashy. There's a lot of, Chihiro's a very cool sword fighter. I really like what he's, able to do. I love the paneling. Some of this paneling is really cool, or I guess not paneling, but some of the artwork is incredible, where you see him covered in black at one point, right? You just see Chihiro's eyes and the sword. I really like that. It makes me look forward to future artwork. The art style of this series is really cool to me. I think it really, really is going to bode well for the series in the future. I hope, I can hope. But what is cool about this, and what I was wondering is, what would the power system be, right? We were introduced early in the chapter to sorcerers, and that there is sorcery in this world, and there's some kind of magic. And so I wondered, is Chihiro going to be just a simple sword wielder, just a simple swordsman, or is there going to be some kind of sorcery? And we learned that his father was able to imbue the katana with sorcery, and so the katana he uses has sorcery in it, and we see him use one move called N10 Black, and we see those goldfish that were in the bowl, right? You see the multicolored one and the black one there, kind of swimming around him. I don't know if those are supposed to be things that people are really seeing. I assumed that they were, but what's really cool is when he says black, then the black fish kind of takes over the blade, makes the blade look black, and he dices through these mafia members. And then he says Nishiki, and the colored one comes. So I'm very interested to see exactly what these powers are, but they were very cool in the debut chapter. This was an amazing fight. And so the chapter ends with him standing over the Yakuza boss, asking where the sorcerers are that are backing them, and we see that Chihiro is hell-bent on taking down these sorcerers. So how did it do as a debut chapter, as a first chapter? I think it did excellent as a first chapter. We established a lot of who Chihiro is, so when he has this cold, aloof personality in the future, we'll remember, okay, well, he had that as a kid. That's not actually changed, but this wanting to fight is much different as an adult. I look forward to seeing kind of more of the details about why his dad had to die in making these swords, what that ended up being, but that's a very cool plot point as well. So I think there's a lot of plot points up in the air. There's a lot of mystery going on, and this is chapter 1. There should be. And for those of you who know how I like manga, maybe you've seen my other videos, mysteries in manga are very important to me. I think they make the manga very interesting. In this one, obviously, we've got a lot of questions we don't have answers to, so I am absolutely looking forward to more from this Kagurabachi manga. So I thought it was a great chapter 1. Obviously, I'm going to say it deserves the cover page. It was really cool. It was a really cool chapter. It was on a series that I hope does well in the magazine. Now, this is again a more traditional shonen manga, it looks like. But like I said, I love the art style, and I have high hopes for this in this magazine. So I loved it. I liked Kagurabachi a lot. It was a great series, or a great first chapter. So moving on, we're going to move on to the first color page, which went to Mama Yuyu chapter 2. So if you don't want spoilers for Mama Yuyu, this is where you dip out. I'm going to be talking about Mama Yuyu for the next little bit. So as most chapter 2s of new series do, Mama Yuyu got the color page. I'm sure Kagurabachi will get the color page next week, and we'll talk about chapter 2 next week. But so how did this do as a second chapter? As you know, second chapters are really important. They follow up the first chapter, and this is where your momentum can start to die down. You still have that color page, but it's hard to keep that momentum going after chapter 2. And so how did Mama Yuyu do? I think it did pretty well. I was actually, after last week, after reading the first chapter of this series, I really loved the first chapter, but I was actually kind of confused as to where they would go from here. It seemed like that first chapter would have worked well as a one-shot chapter, and so I was really curious to see, okay, what's going to happen? Where do we go from here? Because the premise of Mama Yuyu is kind of strange, right? They have someone is selected to be a hero, and in this case, it's our main character Corleo, and someone is selected to be a demon lord. In this case, we have Mamama, who is like a kind demon lord and raised Corleo. So they're not opponents, and that was due to the last hero's doing. Halo, I think his name is. But what I do like in this chapter that we see is we see Corleo struggling with what it means to be a hero. I should probably comment about the color page itself. The color page is cool. I like the line in the background and the red. The art style of this manga isn't the coolest to me. But there's something cool about the water, kind of like more muted colors that are going on in that color page. But anyway, what I was saying before is I like that Corleo really struggles with what it means to be a hero, and if it's okay that he's a hero. I love that kid who was getting beat up before came back and said, you know, thank you for your help, and how much that meant to Corleo is awesome. This is a boy who's desperately struggling with his destiny, with his role as the hero, and what on earth this could mean for him. And when he and Mamama meet at the grave of the last hero, they talk a little bit about that, and we start to see a little bit of a backstory with Mamama and her interactions with the former hero Halo, and possibly how he gave his life, how they had some kind of relationship, and he gave his life up to create this piece. I'm wondering about that. That's a mystery that, you know, I look forward to finding out as we go. But obviously, Mamama cares a lot for Corleo. She cares a lot for the world. And I love that Corleo said he was wrong to say that he wished he hadn't been born. I really like that. I think that that's really interesting. I just think it's good. And this was a good chapter too. And then of course the ending of the chapter threw a big wrench in the whole thing. I love when other demons from other worlds begin to come into this world, because like the orientation of the characters will shift without them knowing, and it's really cool. And we see that kind of eclipse thing going on. As we see another demon, probably from another world, and that Evan, the hero from another world, said was likely to happen. That other monsters would come from other worlds to take out Corleo, and this one is going straight for Corleo, and Corleo kind of has this like flashback to the last fight he had. I do like how scary the real demons are. I mean, they are terrifying. I don't know if I have a problem with eyeballs or something, but the real monsters in this series are really scary, and we see that in this series for sure. And Mamama tries to get him to run and fight back against this demon, but she loses her hand, and as soon as she does that, Corleo comes over and he's ready to fight again. He doesn't now. Evan said something about leaving power with Corleo, and so my guess is as we go further, Corleo is going to learn how to fight and to struggle and to really grow into this hero mentality that he's supposed to have. Right now, I don't know how well he's going to do against this demon, but all that said, it was a good chapter 2. It helped me understand the direction that this series is going to go in for the future. I think our path for the future here is to walk with Corleo down this path of slowly mastering his powers and fighting other demons and monsters that come from other dimensions. And I think that that's going to be the remainder of the series is. I think the obvious question this series is trying to answer is, what does it mean to be a hero? What does it mean to have a fate as well, I think. And so I'm interested in those questions. I'm interested in what this series is going to tell me about those questions. And so we'll have to just wait and see from here how that goes on. But I did like Chapter 2. I like Chapter 1 definitely better, but I like Chapter 2 as well. I'm excited to see where it goes from here as well, for sure. So with that, we're going to move on to the second color page that we find in this week of Weekly Shonen Jump, and that went to Nue's Exorcist. So this is another relatively new manga. This is chapter 18 that came out this week. The color page itself is fine. It's a picture of Shiroha kind of like in like a gym kind of class uniform by a tree. It's fine. It fits the chapter. This is kind of about Shiroha and her kind of sadness about what the whole thing that went down with her family. One of the things that I really want to point out is this Moro guy, this guy that they have sent after Shiroha and after Gakuro to get Nue and to take out Shiroha. He seems like such a compelling character. To be honest with you, a lot of the characters in this series have not really grabbed me, and really compelled me to look at them quite like this guy has. I think that this guy has a really interesting, kind of perspective on, he doesn't want to be called master, and based on last chapter, it seems like that's because a lot of the times he is forced to kill the students that he trains, and so he probably has some guilt and some regret based on that, and so he doesn't really want to be called master, so that makes sense. But for most of the chapter, we deal with Shiroha and Nue in the bath, and to be honest with you, this manga seems like it's kind of going in the direction of having these more fan servicey scenes, which obviously a lot of this chapter is. The two, attractive women characters are taking a bath together. So they're trying to do some fan service here, for sure. But the conversation that they have in this bath is actually kind of interesting. Shiroha says I was gonna try and leave. I was just gonna go so that this won't be a problem. And, kind of no matter how you break it down, Nue seems to say, well, this is going to be a problem. No matter how you dice this, they're going to come after Gakuro. They're going to come after me. Even if you leave, even if you try to convince them not to. And if you go back, they're just going to kill you. And so, like, the conversation is interesting there. And we're starting to see, okay, what happens when you show kindness and love to someone who has never experienced that before, and Shiroha has not experienced that kindness and love before, and so she begins to help out with the making of the breakfast in the morning, and the chapter ends with the barrier that Nue set up being shattered. Nue is an interesting character. She never quite looks like something has happened that is outside of her control. Even when the barrier is broken, she simply says, the barrier's been broken, with like a smirk on her face. Everybody else is a little alarmed, is quite alarmed, including Shiroha, who's very alarmed, that the barrier has been broken, but Nue isn't. And of course, we heard this chapter that Nue's goal is to actually have stronger and stronger opponents come after her and Gakuro, so that Gakuro can continue to improve in his abilities. Now, since I've never talked about Nue's Exorcist before, I think the power system is fine. I think it's interesting. It's something that is, not quite unique. I've seen this kind of thing happen in other series, but I like that Gakuro has control over the shadows. I think that shadow powers are always very cool, and so I'm interested to see how this goes further. And obviously, that Moro, that teacher, is standing. He's the one that broke the barrier, so we're probably going to get some kind of confrontation with him next week. And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to seeing more of him as a character as this manga goes on, and seeing more of this manga. Now, to be honest with you folks, I don't know that this manga is going to last super long. I think, if I had to guess, I think it would be safe this round. I don't think it's going to get canceled next week, but I would worry about it in the next round of cancellations. I think that it's maybe falling into a place that is not, how do you say, it's falling into a place that is not very original. It's a shonen battle manga that is just a shonen battle manga that has demons and spirits in it, and it's kind of, you know, a guy with a sword. It's kind of got a lot of the same tropes, and I actually think that might be why it seems lately that the mangaka has been leaning into the fan service side to try and maybe pull some readers in from that side. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that that's not a very effective tactic to use for me personally, but it is an effective tactic to use to continue your manga in the series. So maybe this will go on for a long time. And we'll get to see more and more about this world. And I honestly, I don't dislike this world, so I'm interested to see what's going to happen in the future. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Nue's Exorcist this week. But the third color page and the final color page this week went to Undead Unluck, a series that I have a lot of familiarity with. I was here when chapter 1 of this series came out, and I've stuck with it ever since. It's actually one of the series that I collect personally. I have all the English volumes that are currently out. I have them collected. So I like Undead Unluck, but this got the color page, and the color page is Rip. It's the kid version with the adult doctor version, and it's a very cool color page. Rip is a very cool character, and this chapter is all about Rip. Last week we saw Fuko tell Rip that he has to kill Uma sick if this disease is going to stop spreading, but Rip is focused on the patients in front of him, and so he starts with oh man, Layla, the girl that's with him. I'm trying to find the name, but he starts with the girl that he's trying to heal, and then he heals all the other patients in the hospital. And we see him look super cool and super encouraging. And we also get this quote, Undead Unluck. I mean, this is obviously, this manga is a fight against God. And Undead Unluck loves this, you know, fighting against God motif. And there's one point where one of the girls asks, like, if God's angry with her. And he says, if there's a God who make such good kids suffer, I'd fillet that jerk up good. And so we see, like, Rip's got this, you know, this thing against God, like all the other characters in this series tend to have, but he is really cool in this series, and he does really save all of these patients, and he's able to stave off their condition really well till Fuko finds the little, you know, kind of mini Umas that have come from Uma sick, and finally Rip is done treating everyone else, and he doesn't know what to do. He's only staved off their condition until Fuko shows up again and says, we must eradicate sick, and Rip is on board. He says nothing in this world takes precedence over life. Nothing. I love Rip. I love Rip in this timeline especially. I really like what Undead Unluck has done with these timeline things, where, you know, certain characters that maybe I didn't think about at all before the Fuko went back, I now think about all the time. And so I really like Rip a lot. I'm encouraged by seeing him in this manga, and I love his iteration in this timeline for sure. So I can't wait to see him fight again. Rip's fighting was always very cool, even in the first timeline. So I'm looking forward to seeing Rip fight. But that's really all I have to say about Undead Unluck this week. And with that, we move into our series that has ended this week, Do Retry. So this series is only, this is chapter 19, and it's the last chapter of the series. I was kind of wondering last week why they didn't end it last week, because I thought that actually would be a good space to end that manga, but instead we get a huge time jump to current day, to Tokyo in 2023, and we see a descendant of Aozora who is getting bullied by his boss and overworked by this company, and he's given up his dream of being a shoemaker. I forget what they specifically call it. But so unfortunately, Aozora has died. His grandpa, Aozora, has died, and he goes to the funeral, and he kind of remembers Aozora just being like this hard-headed guy. And what was interesting about this is this idea of keeping your heart strong, right? We remember that Aozora's dad, he gave up on this idea because he saw how hard it was on the people under him. And we see that in a way, Aozora has done that to Taiga, his grandson. His grandson mainly remembers him for being like this headstrong guy, who's kind of like domineering. And so like, that's kind of tough. Like, But what I like about it is I like that it shows that Aozora, like, this idea is sometimes can lead to that. Often people will feel overwhelmed by someone who is that passionate, who says, strive with everything you have for something, even if you fail. And what I think is interesting is in this series specifically, a lot of times the thing that people have been striving after, they fail at. Originally, Taiga had failed at being a shoemaker, right? So he wasn't able to continue doing that, and so he sacrificed his dream to just live the office life that he hates now. But when he sees the video footage of Aozora at the funeral, and all the things that Aozora went through in boxing and trying to prove himself in that world, he remembers the encouragement of his grandfather, when he is making shoes as a child, and this moves Taiga like emotionally to go ahead and to chase that dream, to return back home with this dream of becoming a shoemaker. And he stands up to his boss at the end and goes back into his room and continues working. And we don't know if that's going to be a success or not, and that's kind of how this manga ends. What I loved about, first of all, I liked Do Retry. I think that there were some chapters in the middle there that were a little tougher to get behind, but overall, I liked this manga. I think that it was a good manga, and I always, from the jump, I loved the message of let your heart be strong. Keep your heart strong in pursuing the things that you want to pursue. I love that. I love this, chase your dreams mentality. And I think this series stood for that the whole time. And I love that. And to take it, kind of out of the realm of this manga specifically, this is the author's second canceled series. So the author who did Do Retry here, his name is Jun, or her name possibly, I don't know, is Jun Kirarazaka. And as a mangaka, this is the second work that they have that has been canceled. The first one was a manga called Bone Collection. I read that when it came out back in the day, but this is the second manga that is canceled. And often you hear from the editorial department that 2 cancellations is not a good look. At 2 cancellations, it's very, very hard to get picked up for another series. And it seems like the author actually has plans to immediately begin another series in Jump Plus, so I'm looking forward to whatever else this author has. But what I liked about this is this manga not being a success, again, this author kind of goes with his characters, right? Of wanting this dream of being a successful mangaka, and facing setbacks, and that's what this is, and that's what Bone Collection was. I think that this work is a great work from this mangaka. I think it shows where their heart's at when it comes to creating manga, and that's, one of the most important things, I think, is to be able to create manga with that intentionality and what you want to say in a story. And I think this is what this mangaka wanted to say. And so I think this manga ended good. I think this is probably the intention that the mangaka had from that Kirarazaka had from the get-go. I think that this time skip thing is what they wanted to end the series on, and they were able to do that, and I think that is great. And it fit really well with the rest of what we got in the series. I enjoyed the series. I wish it, I do actually wish it could have gone on longer, but we are moving on to other series. New series are starting, so, this is understandable. But it was a good series. I liked Do Retry while it was up. And so we'll see what comes next from this mangaka as they move to Jump Plus, which is a little bit more of a forgiving of an outlet, and so we'll see how they handle that. So we will move on to One Piece. So there will be spoilers for One Piece. One Piece is by far the largest manga that we cover, on this podcast. So if you haven't read One Piece, there will be spoilers for One Piece. If you're not caught up on this week's chapter, there will be spoilers for this week's chapter. So spoilers for One Piece incoming. But this week, One Piece released chapter 1092. It seems crazy how many chapters of this series exists now, and I have some things to say about the chapter. First of all, I think the stuff with Kuma and Akainu at the beginning is really, really interesting. I don't know where Kuma's going. I have literally no idea what he's after or what he's pursuing, but I really thought this fight with Akainu was very interesting. Akainu seemingly easily overpowering Akuma in this fight and trying to stop him from getting to wherever he is going, but Kuma did escape, and we see that Akainu is wrestling with and wondering what Kuma could be after in this scenario. And I think this is super interesting. I think it's really interesting. I think it paints a picture. I have never thought Akainu is like traditionally evil in any way. I think that he is looking for what happened to Kuma and why Kuma is doing this. And he's kind of ignoring the world nobles, which is something that I think is interesting, as they kind of berate him, like, what kind of a fleet admiral are you if you can't keep Mary Joa safe? But he just doesn't pay that any mind and continues to struggle on, in his chasing of Kuma. So I look forward to what Kuma is searching for, and what that storyline with him and with Bonnie is going to end up being. I think that we are going to get that at some point, but just not this week. So it was interesting. And then we jump to Egghead again, and we see the Marines taking out the Sea Beasts, and Luffy fighting Kizaru, and this is a really cool fight. Luffy seems to be holding his own, Kizaru even complimenting him. I love that move where Kizaru kind of accelerates and makes himself super fast, kicks Luffy way far through the giant robot. I think that was really cool. I like how Kizaru fights. He's really interesting. I think it's an interesting choice to have Luffy use Snake Man here. I'm not sure why that would be the form that he uses, but he does, and it is cool to see him kind of hold his own against Kizaru. But Kizaru punts him a good distance, and then of course when faced with just Frankie, Lilith, and who else is there? Bonnie? Is Bonnie there? Yeah, when faced with just those three, Kizaru is not phased. We do see an attack by Bonnie called Age Skewer, and I'm really interested to see what that attack is. Kizaru easily sidesteps it and takes care of Bonnie pretty easily. But then he disappears up into the control room where everyone else is, and this is obviously alarming to everyone in the control room. But they've cracked the code. Vegapunk, Prime Vegapunk, the Stella, and the other Vegapunk that is there, the other Vegapunks that are there with him, have cracked the code that York has set up, and so they've gotten through. I love all throughout this chapter Kizaru's kind of. I look forward to getting more from him. There's some kind of history he has with Vegapunk, and I really want to see what that is and get more on that. But obviously the coolest thing to me this chapter was Luffy in Gear 5th grabbing Kizaru and holding him down. I love that he has gone out and back through the barrier and is still standing, something that Vegapunk did not think it was possible, and if Kizaru wasn't made of light, would not have been possible for him. So I really like this. I think it's cool, and obviously the giant robot's eyes turn on. I think we're going to get a little bit more out of Egghead before we end up going off to the next island. But it was a good chapter. It was really cool. I love seeing that one panel where Luffy's grabbing Kizaru is really cool. So it was a really good chapter. I really liked it. I really liked it. So that means then we will move on to talking about My Hero Academia. This week, volume 400 came out. Not a whole lot of fanfare for chapter 400 rather. Also, My Hero Academia spoilers from this point on. If you are not caught up and you want to be, don't, I'm going to say stuff about this chapter. So, but this chapter was interesting, I thought. It gave a lot of shine to Aoyama. Also, we did a little bit of the fan service thing with Hagakure, the invisible girl, who's always kind of been a little weird, like, because she's like, her quirk kind of necessitates her being naked, and so she became kind of visible in this chapter, and they did a little fan service thing with that, which is fine. It was kind of funny. I like Aoyama. I like the severity. He knows he's not going to get to go back. He is trying to redeem himself, and really, this chapter is all about redemption, right? It's all about these two characters, Aoyama and Stain, trying to work towards their redeeming. And obviously, most of this chapter is dedicated to the fight that All Might has with All For One. All For One. Now being a small child, they've hit him hard enough that he is the equivalent of a small child, and just when they think he's gonna come back, we see that Stain is back, and is working with All Might to stop All For One. I love this. The only hero Stain's ever respected has been All Might, and so this is a great team up. And so it's good. I think this is a good way to resolve this fight. To be honest with you guys, I'm not that into My Hero Academia right now. I have been a big fan of it in the past, and this past arc has been kind of hard for me to follow on a week-to-week basis. Maybe doing these podcasts will help me with that, but yeah, I haven't been that big of a fan of it, but I did like that Stain is back. I liked that we could tie him in this way. I thought that was interesting. So yeah, take that for what it's worth. I thought My Hero Academia was okay this week. Which will bring us then to, I believe, Sakamoto Days. If you don't want to hear anything about Sakamoto Days, I'm going to be talking about chapter 135, which is what came out. So if you're not caught up, don't worry about it. Just go read the chapter and then come back. But if you don't want spoilers, leave here. So the chapter opens up in a flashback where we see their original interactions with this Kamihate, this amazing sniper that we see, and that's kind of interesting. We just get to see how good of a sniper he is, and so that's interesting. And now then we go back into the fight that Sakamoto, Shin, and Amane are having with Kamihate, who's trying to snipe at them. And several cool things happen during this chapter. Sakamoto grabs like a telephone pole and swings around. That was really cool. But I think the biggest headline from this chapter is that Hisuke is back, and he is willing to fight. He has his sniping abilities back, and he's willing to fight this sniper. First of all, I always love snipers. I always love long-range fighters, and so I really think that it's cool that Hisuke is back, and he's going to fight this sniper extraordinaire who's a member of the Order. I'm very excited to see where this is, how this fight's going to go down and how it's going to end. The Kamihate seems a little weird towards the end of the chapter, but I'm very glad that Hisuke is back, so that they can do this fight. But that's really all I had to say about it. I really liked the chapter, but yeah, Hisuke's back and ready to go. So next we're going to talk about Martial Master Asumi. This is what came out this week. Is chapter 13. And I gotta say at the outset, I really like this manga. I know that this mangaka did another a sumo manga not that long ago that I think was quite successful, actually. So it's not surprising that this manga all about MMA is looking good as well. I think this guy likes combat sport, and that seems to be his area of expertise. But I thought this chapter was really good. I love that we get introduced to the other competitors in this tournament that Nito is going to be in, and we can see Nito's first fight. I love this. So I love how nervous Nito is, and that makes sense. I mean, they talk about how this is a 70 kilogram and below weight class, and Nito is, I believe, 63 kilograms. So he is way underweight and undersized for this tournament. So, and in a combat sport, that makes all the difference in the world. And so, Nito being at this disadvantage is definitely alarming, and I love that he's like, the nervousness that he displays is great. Yoshitoki is an awesome corner for him. I love this scene, the panel where he's jumping up and down, the thing that calms Nito down, right? Where he's saying, I'm not afraid, and then in his head you see him saying, I'm so scared. He's doing this thing, and this is, we see into Nito's head, so we know that he is very nervous, right? But from the outside, this would look intimidating, don't you think? I think that this would look intimidating. This guy he's jumping super high, saying, I'm not afraid, and then immediately sprinting towards his opponent in the beginning of the fight. We learn that his big move is this flying knee, and from that he can go into takedowns. So he lands this flying knee on his opponent, takes him down to the ground, and just starts pummeling him until the ref has to break it up and stop it. And so 6 seconds into the fight is stopped, and he is declared the winner by knockout. This is an amazing showing by Nito. It's a crazy amazing first match of his. I love the commentary by all the other characters. I just really love this chapter. I love that at the end of the chapter, he's like, I'm excited about this. He's into it. I really like this manga. I think it's a cool manga that really shows character personalities really well. And so I loved that about it. But yeah, that's kind of what I had to say about Martial Master Asumi. I also just realized just now that Martial Master Asumi is MMA, but yeah, so the next manga we'll cover here is Mission Yozakura Family. This week was chapter 194. So again, spoilers for Mission Yozakura Family. If you are not caught up, you don't have to be here. And I don't have a ton to say about this, other than the family's talking about Shinzo's wedding, right? They all have different thoughts about this and what that means for the continuance of their family. And of course, Shinzo doesn't want to get married. I love that Ryu, the creepiest dude ever, has set this up, and so of course they're gonna go and they're gonna break Shinzo out of this, and they're gonna get him back. So the next arc seems to be all about getting Shinzo out of this faux marriage. I do kind of wonder if Katana, Ryu's daughter, is not actually gonna be a part of, they're not actually gonna have a relationship after this. I kind of think that it might head in that direction, but I do think it's funny. Shinzo being socially obligated to do things is always funny to me. So I think that the arc ahead will be interesting. Shinzo is actually he's my second favorite Yozakura family member behind Kyoichiro. So I'm interested to see the arc that is all about him and how he has improved over time. I wonder if Alpha and Hifumi will be a big part of this arc. I don't know, but either way, we're headed into a whole new arc centering around Shinzo. So I'm happy for that, and that is all I really have to say about that one. So next up we have Kill Blue. This week was chapter 21. Now, as always, if you haven't read the chapter and you want to, go read the chapter before we talk about this. But I will say I really like this chapter. I think Ogami was super cool in this chapter. I like how we get around the hypnotizing thing by shooting those shots up into the air. It was genius. And what I love even more about it is when he explains it and says, well, I knew that when I fired the shots, I was going to aim for the stretcher. And so I had to base the rest of the plan around that, and I just kind of improvised. This is such a realistic picture of what you would have to do. I think I like it in manga when someone is like, I've set everything up in advance, and Naruto is kind of a big proponent of this, right? Where they, stuff whole strings of, actually, I did this first, start happening. But I like that Ogami's like, no, I kind of had to wing it after I was like, okay, we're going to get it on the stretcher. And so I really loved that part. And obviously the end, we're setting up for the next chapter where if Norn wakes up, she's going to be hypnotized to fall in love with the first person she sees. And I would bet a good amount of money that Ogami is going to be the first person she sees when she wakes up. I just also want to say I like the little brother who only makes robot noises. I think he's kind of fun. And I hope these characters actually don't just die or fade into the background after this. I actually like both of the brother characters that are fighting against our main characters. But either way, it's really interesting. It was really cool. Ogami was really cool this chapter. And so I think it's definitely notable for that, if for nothing else. So that brings us to Blue Box. This week was chapter 117. For those of you who don't know, I am a big Blue Box fan. I love Blue Box. It's one of my favorite series running in the manga right now. Believe it or not, it actually is. And I love this chapter. We get the continuing battle against... what is his opponent's name? Mochizuki. We get this continuing badminton match that Taiki has against Mochizuki, trying to prove that it's worth all of this effort. I think that Mochizuki is actually a very compelling character. He's worried about his position. If he loses here, he's not worth anything, really, in badminton. So he's kind of got this fatalistic thing going anyway, and we see that fatalism really hit a nerve when it seems like he might lose to Taiki, and in fact he does lose to Taiki, because Taiki is really, really good. That shot where Taiki hits the last shot and wins is awesome, and Taiki actually goes on to win the whole tournament. I love that Yusa says I wouldn't have lost when they tell him that Taiki won. I think that's interesting. I think they've really built a badminton rival in Yusa for Taiki. They've built him up very well for that. So I'm excited to see kind of how they continue down that path in the future. I think that'll be really interesting. And so we see Chinatsu comes to congratulate Taiki for winning the first year tournament, which is great. Taiki definitely needed to win the first year tournament, but it's never a guaranteed win in this series. He doesn't have a guaranteed win here. He's got to work hard, and he certainly did, and certainly pulled off the win, and that was really good. And his little conversation with Chinatsu was really cute too. When he even calls her by her first name, Chinatsu, he drops the senpai part, obviously leading to a kind of embarrassed reaction from the two of them. And so, yeah, I thought that was good. I like that part of the chapter too. But it was a good chapter. Overall, it was a really good Blue Box chapter. I liked the little bit of character work with Mochizuki, and even the cuteness that we get at the end of the chapter with Taiki and Chinatsu. Overall, it's a weird world to be in where Taiki and Chinatsu are officially a couple now, but I like it. It's gone well so far. And so, yeah, I love Blue Box, and this is a good chapter for sure. So that will lead us into the next manga we're talking about, which is Akane-banashi, and this chapter was chapter 74. This is the first time I have the opportunity to talk about Akane-banashi in a podcast or video format since it came out, and I absolutely adore this manga. Before I read this manga, I knew nothing at all about Rakugo, and I love this manga so much. I think that both the writer Yuki Suenaga and the artist Takamasa Moe are great at what they do. I think this is really cool. And this chapter focuses a lot on Karashi and his kind of his background, right? And Karashi is a character that I really liked this whole time. I've loved Karashi. I like the introduction of this businesswoman childhood friend that he has here, and how she's jealous that he always gets everything right. I've always loved his thought about the reason he does Rakugo is because it's one of the only things that has presented a challenge to him in life. I think that even in our own lives, we have these moments where it's these challenging things that interest us, that draw us in, things that we can improve in and get better at. I love that. I also love his reading of the history of the company. That was so cool. And he's so charismatic, and it comes so naturally to him. But what I love is again, when she's like, he does everything perfect all the time, we see his master, this square-headed dude, come in and berate him, right? He gets on him because he's not, he's like, you think, what did he say? Are you that satisfied at having performed your play-pretend version of Kodan? I just love this. He like beats him down, and this is what Karashi needs, right? Karashi needs a mentor who is strict and harsh if he's going to improve. He needs to be taught where he is in skill level and in the general hierarchy of the world. And this master definitely seems like he has done that for Karashi. So I'm really excited about that. Also, the text messages that we see on his phone, I'm interested to see what's going to go on in the near future. I really love this manga. It's got a similar feel to a manga called Bakuman, which is a manga about manga authors. But I really love this. I look forward to seeing what's going to happen in the future with everybody. And this chapter was about a side character the whole time, and I absolutely loved this chapter as well. So, yeah. Next, moving on, we're going to talk about Cipher Academy. Chapter 40 came out this week. Cipher Academy, another manga I have not had the opportunity to talk about in a video format. And I'm going to be honest with you folks, Cipher Academy confuses the crap out of me. I've read all 40 chapters. I read it since it first came out, and actually when it first came out, I liked it a ton. I really thought it was great when it first came out, and it just kind of confused me. I think some of the patterns and the complexity of the story is a lot, I think, to handle, especially with the language barrier that we have, obviously reading it in English instead of Japanese, which it was originally written in. But I've always loved Uro Hazaka, and I love this little confidence thing going on with En. They call her En-chan. I don't know what the actual full name is, but I love the confidence that Uro Hazaka shows in her. And how this confidence leads to her confrontation with Kubanashi. Kubanashi, a character who's very interesting. I think I've always liked Kubanashi since I first saw her, but I liked how En challenged that. Ensa is her full name. Ensa Kasuri. But I liked how Ensa challenged her, and then when she actually challenged her is the first time, I believe, in this whole manga that we see En's eyes. We haven't seen her eyes, and then obviously after this she will get her haircut. Some things that are interesting is Yukako is kind of conspiring with Kubanashi. I'm wondering what's going on there, but En is going to handle the rest of the students who are going to go to the digital Cipher Academy, and so that's really interesting. And the end of the chapter ends with Uro Hazaka having to choose between getting info on the dancers that she's been trying to save, or finding out more about this girl that she's indebted to. And so she can't go to both. She doesn't have that opportunity, and so she must choose one, or he must choose one rather. And I'm really interested to see which choice he makes. If I had to guess, I'm going to guess it's the one that he's indebted to. But that's just my guess. So that's all I really have to say about Cipher Academy. So that will lead us then into Icehead Gill. So spoilers for Icehead Gill. We're going to be talking about chapter 12, the newest chapter. This manga is interesting. I can't decide whether I like the art style or I find it difficult to read. But either way, I think that the premise of the story is interesting. There's like a renewed interest, I think, in the Norse kind of aesthetic. I think Vinland Saga might have had something to do with that. But this is all about, obviously, that Norse aesthetic. And I actually do love the trolls. I think the trolls are really interesting character designs. Obviously, this chapter's a lot of fighting. We get, quotes about the confidence in Greatest and Sliz. So I'm sure that they will be fine. But Gill finally meets up with the person that raised him, this Eden, who is herself the Book of Wisdom that the Liches have been looking for. So it's interesting that she's going to probably know how to decode the pendant, but we obviously got to beat the main Lich before we get there. Overall, interesting chapter. I like the design. As I said, I like the design of the trolls. I think that Eden is a very interesting character, but we'll see where it goes. We'll see where this manga goes. I don't have super high hopes for Icehead Gill. But maybe that's my bias playing out. If you really like Icehead Gill, let me know. I have a lukewarm feeling about it. That's all I got. But that's all I have on Icehead Gill. Next we got Me and Roboco. I guess spoilers for Me and Roboco. As a gag manga, it's kind of hard to spoil this one, but we're going to talk about chapter 153. I really have one thing to say about this. It's funny that they try and stay in the room the whole time and just do nothing. This whole chapter, and that's what they actually do. I think the stuff with the editor, especially the horror gags that happen, are really funny. So I thought that was funny. I thought it was funny in that way, but overall, just kind of like a Me and Roboco chapter. I didn't hate it, but I didn't super love it either. It literally felt like the author might have been searching for ideas this chapter, but it was okay. So, with that said, we are coming to our second to last manga that came out this week, and that is the Ichinose family's Deadly Sins. This week, chapter 41 came out. If you have not read this manga, spoiler warning, and this manga is one that there are a couple spoilers going on. And so we see this chapter is a series of back and forths. There's a couple different connecting threads, and what I'm going to say is the connecting thread in this time is the sweet drink. I don't know if it's tea. I think it's tea, but the sweet tea that Tsubasa has, and then we see that his dad has at the end of the chapter. Soda and Tsubasa are going home, but by the time they get home, they realize that another family has lived there, and when I say they, only Tsubasa makes it home until everything goes black and he wakes back up in the hospital. Again, we see another scene, a 2-page spread of the whole family around Tsubasa as he wakes up. Again, with the knowledge that the whole family has amnesia. This is the same recurring dream that has always happened, and Tsubasa seems to be back in it. Begging the question of, have they been out of this dream at all, right? That's always the question. This time, though, importantly, Soda is there as well, and he wasn't there before. So, if you want my guess, the last 2-page spread, we see everybody from the family lying unconscious on the floor except for the dad, and we see the dad holding the iced tea. So, my current guess, and this manga continues to subvert my expectations every single week, so I have actually no idea what's going to happen from here on out, but it seems like the dad has something to do with them being unconscious, as he's the only one who isn't unconscious. Here's one of the other things I want to point out is in the last panel, Shiori, the little sister, is older. It's not her younger body. It seems like it's her older one, which means that I think that everything that happened with Soda and Tsubasa in the last couple chapters was real. And now we find ourselves back in this timeline, but they're all unconscious and they're all having this dream again. Obviously, it seems like the dad is responsible. So this is a very interesting manga. It's there have been several chapters that have blown my mind. And this chapter also blew my mind. It continues to surprise me, and it continues to make me every single week go, what on earth is happening in this manga? And so, I look forward to the weeks ahead to see what is going to happen. I think that there is a possibility. I think that this manga will end. I don't know why I feel that way, but I think that it's possible that it'll end next week, but I think it's unlikely. But that's really all I had to say about the Ichinose family's Deadly Sins. I do really like it as a manga. I'm just interested to see where we go from here. But that will bring us to our last manga for today, and that is Witch Watch. This week was chapter 125, so if you're not caught up, here's your spoiler warning for Witch Watch, chapter 125. Witch Watch is a series that I actually very much enjoy. I think that this is a super successful series, the second super successful series for this mangaka, as they produce Sket Dance as well back in the day. I actually never read Sket Dance, but I can see why, if it was at all as good as this manga, I get why it was successful. So in this chapter, Momochi comes back into the picture, and we see that Miharu has the plan to get the flower into Ran, and this is the only way that they're going to take Ran down. But what I loved about this chapter is getting all of the ogre techniques that Morihito learned, and so I'm very interested in that. We see him use those techniques, and even interestingly, Ran's father came up with one of those techniques and had taught it to Ran, but he had forgot it because he blocked everything about his father out. Obviously, tumultuous relationships there. I think Moe and Ran's relationship is very interesting, and so I think that this fight has been super interesting, and there's really no way for Moe to win by himself. He's got to exhaust Ran, and this flower is hopefully going to be able to do that. And so we see that that Miharu, with the help of Momochi, teleported in. So hopefully we're going to get that flower into Ran in the next chapter. My guess is Ran's going to dodge this, and we're going to have to figure out how to get that in. But I will say, for a manga that is typically a kind of slice of life gag manga, when this manga does battles, they are incredible. I mean, this mangaka is amazing at doing battles. It makes me wonder why Battle Shonen was never kind of on the table. From what I understand, Sket Dance is a slice of life comedy manga as well. And so I really wonder why this mangaka doesn't want to do more action scenes. And obviously this manga is a good bridge, I think, between that gag feeling and the action scenes, because they can have both. So I really like this manga. I don't think it's going to end in this next chapter. I think that it will hopefully go on for a while yet, but we'll see. I think this fight might end in the next chapter, and we'll see if that comes to fruition. And that is all of the manga that came out in Weekly Shonen Jump this week. Jujutsu Kaisen and The Elusive Samurai were both on break this week. And if you're wondering where's Black Clover, Black Clover has officially been moved to coming out quarterly. So in the winter, Black Clover will be released, but I won't cover it on this because it's no longer part of Weekly Shonen Jump, which was a surprise when it happened, but that's where we are. But yeah, Jujutsu Kaisen, The Elusive Samurai, taking a break this week. We'll see them back, I believe, next week. So the last thing I want to do on this podcast before I close this out is I want to go over what my top 3 would be for every week. And so this is the thing that if you bought Weekly Shonen Jump from a convenience store in Japan, in that Weekly Shonen Jump, there would be a postcard that you could fill out your top 3 manga and send that in. And this matters a whole lot. The weekly reader surveys matter a whole lot to the mangaka and to the editorial department because it lets them know how different series are doing. And so I kind of want to do my own version of that by listing my top 3 out in here. So my top 3 this week, my number 3 would be One Piece. It's hard, every time One Piece is out, it's hard for me not to put One Piece on the list. There's just so much history I have with that series, and this was a good chapter. I loved Gear 5 coming into play, so it's hard not to put it there. My number 2 is Martial Master Asumi. Like I said, I really love this manga, and this chapter in particular, Nito's first fight was awesome. It was so cool, and it was such a good chapter that I can't help but ranking it number 2 this week. And my number 1 pick, what I would put at the very top, for this week would be Kagurabachi. I don't think anything else in the magazine measured up to Kagurabachi this week. I think that was an amazing first chapter, and I would put it as my number 1 pick this week. So yeah, so if I was filling out a reader card, it would be Kagurabachi, Martial Master Asumi, and then One Piece. Those would be my top 3. So I really enjoyed this. I hope to be able to do this more in the future. I really enjoy recording podcasts like this. I do have another podcast where I talk about all kinds of stories with different guests that I have on called the Life's Legends podcast. You can find that on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you do. I believe this month me and my mom actually are going through the novel Peter Pan. If that sounds interesting to you, hop on over to Life's Legends. I would love to have your viewership over there as well. But if you have anything to say about any of these chapters, I'd love to talk to you down in the comment section below. Definitely leave a comment. If you liked anything I had to say, like this video, subscribe to the channel, write a review if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts. But I'd love to be able to engage with you folks on these series, on these stories that I really do love. So thanks so much for listening, and until next time, this is Shonen Express signing off.